Vienna, Austria, March 1983. At a UN disarmament conference, Soviet General Viktor Petrov thinks he's safe, away from Moscow, away from spies, away from mistakes. Then he notices a woman watching him across a reception hall. She's fluent in Russian, speaks like she knows his childhood, and introduces herself as a human rights lawyer. But she's not here to argue treaties. She's here to steal a war plan called 7 Days to the Rhine. And if she fails, NATO won't just lose leverage. Europe could burn. This is Operation Music Box. She isn't the kind of spy who kicks down doors. She's the kind who makes you open them yourself. MI6 recruits her in the mid-1970s after she proves she can do what most officers can't. Think like a Soviet citizen without romanticizing the Soviet Union. Raised in London among émigré families who fled the East after 1956. She learned Russian in kitchens where people whispered about betrayal like it was weather. The language came first, then the anger. Then the understanding that anger without precision is just noise. Cambridge polished what instinct had started. She studied history and literature. But what mattered more was learning the art of sounding certain even when lying. Her tutors remember a student who asked uncomfortable questions about Soviet power structures, not with contempt, but with genuine curiosity about how systems control people who believe they're free. That distinction mattered. It meant she could inhabit a role without performing it. Her formative event isn't tragedy, it's realization. During a debrief on a failed Eastern Europe recruitment attempt in 1978, she watches experienced case officers dissect why their target refused to cooperate. They talk about money, about leverage, about family pressure. She sits quietly for 20 minutes, then speaks. You're treating him like a businessman. Soviet officials aren't motivated by wealth. They're motivated by the terror of being ordinary. The room goes silent. The senior officer asks her to explain. She does. You offered him security. He already has that from the state. You should have offered him significance. Within 6 months, she's running her first solo operation in East Berlin. The target is a mid-level bureaucrat with access to internal communications. She doesn't bribe him. She makes him feel seen. She asks about his work like it matters, references his published papers like they're important, treats his opinions like they're dangerous enough to suppress. He talks. Then he provides documents. Then he asks when they can meet again. The operation extracts 18 months of intelligence before the bureaucrat's reassignment closes the window. MI6 labels the case file under operational designation Mirror Play. The analyst's note reads, Subject displayed instinctive understanding of psychological capture through manufactured intimacy. Her defining skill is simple and lethal. She can identify what someone is desperate to be seen as, and mirror it back until they surrender. By 1982, she's operating under deep cover across Western Europe, specializing in what MI6 internally calls controlled environment intimacy operations. The doctrine is straightforward. Place an officer in sustained proximity to a target, manufacture emotional dependency, then extract intelligence through voluntary disclosure rather than coercion. It works because the target never feels stolen from. They feel chosen, and people who feel chosen tend to prove they deserve it. The strategic context driving this entire operation is brutal in its simplicity. In 1983, the Cold War is hot in everything but name. NATO and the Warsaw Pact prepare for the scenario everyone denies wanting. Rapid invasion, mass armor movement, chemical escalation across Central Europe. The intelligence doctrine is classic. Access beats interception. Signals intelligence can catch fragments of communication, call signs, movement patterns, encrypted bursts. But fragments don't tell you the story. They don't show you the full map of intent. Western intelligence knows the Soviets have invasion plans. They know the Warsaw Pact conducts exercises that look suspiciously like rehearsals. They know chemical weapons stockpiles are positioned forward. What they don't know is the sequencing, the timing, the decision tree that turns posture into action. That's the gap. And gaps kill people. Petrov becomes relevant because of his access. He's a Soviet general attached to strategic planning for Central European theater operations. Not the top of the command structure, but close enough to see the architecture. His role involves coordination between Soviet forces and Warsaw Pact allies, which means he reviews operational drafts, movement schedules, and logistics frameworks. Intelligence analysts tracking Soviet doctrine identify his name in intercepts related to planning conferences. By late 1982, MI6 concludes he's seen the map. But Petrov is the kind of target you don't turn with ideology. He's a general, a believer in power structures, discipline, and historical destiny. He's not disillusioned. He's not broke. He's not compromised by scandal. He's exactly what he appears to be. A Soviet officer who thinks history is on his side. Approaching him with money would be insulting. Approaching him with ideology would be absurd. Approaching him with anything that looks like recruitment would trigger immediate defensive protocols. He has one vulnerability: Vienna. Quarterly UN disarmament conferences create a rhythm away from Moscow's surveillance apparatus. The KGB maintains watch on Soviet personnel abroad, but the sheer volume of diplomatic movement creates operational friction. Officers drink. They socialize. They participate in receptions where Western attendees are expected. The environment allows for what Moscow calls controlled fraternization, limited interaction with foreigners under monitored conditions. Petrov attends these conferences regularly. He follows the rules. He maintains professional distance. But he's also a man in his 50s spending weeks at a time in a foreign city where the wine is better and the conversations are less constrained than Moscow allows. MI6 doesn't need him to defect. They need something cleaner. Temporary betrayal that feels like romance, not treason. The obstacles are immediate and severe. Petrov is trained to spot recruitment attempts. Soviet intelligence runs regular counterintelligence briefings emphasizing Western targeting methods. Financial inducements, ideological appeals, compromat operations. He's cautious. He's disciplined. Any affair risks KGB surveillance or internal suspicion from colleagues. Soviet officers abroad understand that personal relationships with foreigners generate paperwork and questions. The social penalty for appearing compromised is professional death. The documents themselves are controlled. Removing classified material from secure facilities is nearly impossible. Petrov doesn't carry operational plans in his briefcase for casual reading. Access means viewing documents in controlled environments, often with witnesses, always with logs. The idea that he would physically transport sensitive material outside official channels seems operationally absurd. The trigger comes in January 1983, when an MI6 analyst reviewing signals intercepts confirms Petrov's access to operational planning drafts connected to Central European invasion routes. The document designation appears in decoded communications. Rhine Directive, Consultation Draft. The name alone changes the calculation. Rhine means the western edge of Germany. Directive means standing orders. Consultation means the plan is being refined across multiple command levels. That changes the mission status from watch to take. Authorization for operation. Music box is granted in February 1983. The mission timeline is 12 months maximum. The objective is precise. Obtain photographic documentation of Warsaw Pact operational planning for rapid invasion of Western Europe, specifically focusing on initial assault corridors, armored thrust sequencing, and chemical weapons deployment schedules. The method is equally precise. Sustained intimacy operation, using legend-supported officer to create voluntary disclosure environment. No blackmail, no coercion, no evidence of theft. During the operational planning phase, the assigned case officer reviews the operative's psychological profile. There's a note from her previous handler, written after the East Berlin operation concluded. Officer displays exceptional compartmentalization capacity. Post-mission debriefs reveal no detectable emotional residue from intimacy operations. Recommend continued deployment in roles requiring sustained deception without relationship bleed-through. Another note, from a different operation, is more pointed. Subject reported difficulty re-engaging with personal relationships after prolonged deep cover. Declined counseling. Stated, "I prefer work." The planners note this, but proceed. The mission requires someone who can manufacture intimacy without experiencing it. That's not a skill you train. It's a capability you select for. The cover identity is built like a weapon. Anna Weiss, Austrian legal counsel affiliated with UN human rights initiatives. The legend is constructed with surgical precision. Not a diplomat, too visible, too documented, too constrained by protocol. Not a journalist, too nosy, too likely to trigger defensive responses from Soviet personnel. A lawyer is perfect, intelligent, morally framed, expected to ask probing questions that feel personal but remain professionally justifiable. MI6 supports the legend with infrastructure, not theatrics. A real apartment lease is established in Vienna's 3rd district, Landstrasse, in a building with mixed international tenants. The address is Radetzky Strasse, apartment 4B, a second-floor unit chosen for its street-level visibility and rear exit access. The apartment is furnished modestly but completely. Books in German and Russian, legal journals, a desk with case files that can survive inspection. A bank account is opened at Credit Anstalt, matching the lifestyle. Not wealthy, just unbothered. Monthly deposits reflect consultancy fees for human rights documentation work. The transactions are real enough to pass audit. A file cabinet in the apartment contains believable cases. Names, dates, typed notes on asylum applications and civil rights violations in Eastern Europe. The documents are authentic enough that even a trained intelligence officer reviewing them would find consistent detail. One file concerns a Polish family seeking asylum through Austrian channels. Another documents alleged labor violations in Czechoslovakia. The information is real. The cases are real. Only the lawyer is fictional. The team is kept small by design to reduce leakage potential. One case officer coordinates from London, communicating through scheduled dead drops and coded newspaper advertisements. One surveillance lead operates in Vienna, tracking Petrov's movements and logging routine patterns. One technical specialist maintains the equipment and handles film processing. One emergency exfiltration plan is prepared, routed through Graz if Vienna becomes hostile, with fallback options extending to Munich if Austrian territory becomes inaccessible. Tradecraft equipment is compact and brutal in its efficiency. A Minox camera with silent operation and microfilm capability is standard issue for document photography. The camera measures 8 centimeters long and weighs less than 200 grams. It can photograph documents in low light without flash, producing images that survive enlargement for analysis. A decorative music box is altered by technical services to hide the camera, spare film cartridges, and batteries. The concealment is internally labeled MBX7. The music box plays Schubert's Ave Maria when opened, a detail designed to seem personal rather than operational. The hidden compartment is accessed by rotating the base counterclockwise while pressing the rear hinge. Total access time, 4 seconds. A one-time pad sheet for short signals back to London is buried inside a legal textbook on international humanitarian law. The pad allows for encrypted communication of critical updates. Contact established. Access confirmed. Exfil required. Each message is limited to 5 words. Once transmitted, the corresponding section of the pad is destroyed. The system is unbreakable if protocols are followed. Even the social calendar is engineered. Anna Weiss attends receptions where Soviet delegates expect Western moral theater. Speeches about peace, champagne, polite confrontation over human rights records. She positions herself so Petrov is forced to notice her without her appearing to chase him. The rule is strict and unambiguous. The target must feel he initiated everything. If Petrov thinks he's being pursued, he'll retreat. If he thinks he discovered her, he'll advance. 2 elements define the placement strategy. The operation is codenamed Larkspur internally, referring to the botanical concept of chance encounters and timed proximity. Surveillance teams log Petrov's routine down to the minute. He departs the hotel bar at 21:40 hours every conference night. He returns to his suite at 22:10 hours. He takes breakfast in the hotel restaurant between 07:30 and 0800 hours. He walks through Stat Park on non-conference days between 1500 and 1600 hours. The data accumulates. Patterns emerge. The patterns become weapons. First contact is not a flirtation. It's a collision of worlds. At a diplomatic reception on March 17, 1983, Petrov makes an offhand remark about Western sentimentality in Russian, assuming no one understands. He's speaking to a Polish delegate, gesturing toward a group of Austrian human rights advocates across the room. The comment is dismissive, almost cruel. They think justice is a conversation. Anna Weiss is standing 3 meters away. She turns, answers in flawless Russian, calm and amused and slightly disappointed. Justice is always a conversation. The question is whether you're honest enough to have it. The room doesn't stop. No one else notices. But Petrov notices. A Western woman speaking Moscow Russian, not the formal diplomatic variety taught in universities, but the living language of argument and intimacy. He doesn't feel interrogated. He feels recognized. She doesn't attack him. She references Tolstoy's concept of historical inevitability, then pivots to personal experience. She mentions her father fleeing Eastern Europe, told with enough pain to be believable, but not enough detail to be verified. The story is designed. A Czech émigré who believed in reform until Soviet tanks made belief irrelevant. She doesn't blame Petrov. She blames systems. She treats ideology as something intimate. Family, loss, fractured empires. For a man who spends his professional life defending Soviet doctrine, the conversation feels dangerously close to being understood rather than opposed. They speak for 11 minutes. Then a Soviet aide approaches, and Petrov excuses himself with formal politeness. But before he leaves, he asks if she'll be attending the next reception. She says she might be. He says he hopes she is. That's the shift. Hope is intent, and intent is the first crack. Complications arrive fast. Over the next 2 weeks, a Soviet aide begins shadowing Petrov more closely after the third encounter. Not a formal tale, but a presence. Too attentive, too loyal, too curious. The surveillance team identifies him as Captain Dmitry Volkov, attached to the delegation's security contingent. He's not KGB, but he reports to someone who is. Anna counters by reducing contact frequency, letting tension build. She appears at one reception, skips the next, returns for a third. The absence creates hunger. Petrov starts looking for her. She also introduces controlled vulnerability. During their fourth conversation at a reception on April 2nd, she tells him about her father's death. The story is calibrated for emotional impact. A man who fled oppression only to die disappointed that the West couldn't fulfill its promises either. She doesn't cry. She doesn't ask for sympathy. She just states it like fact. Petrov responds by defending Soviet intentions while criticizing Western hypocrisy. She lets him. That's the trick. She makes him feel safe being honest. The operational window opens when Petrov invites her to coffee outside official venues. The invitation comes on April 23rd during a brief hallway encounter between conference sessions. He suggests a cafe near the Belvedere Palace, neutral territory, public but not official. An unguarded choice made to feel private. That's the shift. A reception is public theater. Coffee is intent. The cafe is chosen by Petrov, but MI6 had already tagged it during surveillance mapping. Internally, the location is designated Cafe Mirror. The establishment offers clear sight lines to entrances, rear exit access through a kitchen corridor, and a table configuration that allows private conversation without complete isolation. The team confirms one additional detail. Petrov's briefcase is never searched entering the conference hotel. Soviet security checks focus on preventing unauthorized access to facilities, not on monitoring what delegates carry. That means paper can travel if he chooses to carry it. By November 1983, it's no longer a flirtation. It's a dependency dressed as romance. Petrov believes he's having an affair with the one Western woman who doesn't treat him like a villain or a trophy. He thinks he's found someone who sees past the uniform, who understands the impossible position Soviet officers occupy, defending a system they privately question while publicly maintaining absolute loyalty. Anna calibrates the pace with precision, affection, then distance, then intellectual challenge, then forgiveness. Every emotional beat is a lever. Every conversation is an operation within the operation. She learns his patterns. He drinks vodka but prefers Austrian wine when away from Soviet colleagues. He talks about his daughter in Moscow with genuine affection, but won't discuss his marriage. He becomes animated discussing military history, specifically the Eastern Front campaigns of World War II. He deflects questions about current operations, but grows expansive when discussing strategic theory. She doesn't push. She listens. She validates. She makes him feel like the smartest man in Vienna. The breakthrough comes during their 9th overnight encounter in mid-October. Petrov arrives carrying tension like weather. A planning session in Moscow went poorly. Disagreements over logistics, timelines. Criticism from a superior who doesn't understand frontline realities. He doesn't say this directly, but Anna reads the anger in how he pours wine, how he dismisses pleasantries. She doesn't ask what happened. She asks how he tolerates working in a system that punishes competence. The question is dangerous. It's also irresistible. He talks, not about specific operations, but about the frustration of seeing elegant planning compromised by political interference. He mentions reviewing scenarios where timing is everything, where days matter, where the entire structure collapses if execution doesn't match design. He doesn't name the scenarios. He doesn't provide details. But he establishes that he sees them, that he works on them, that he carries the weight of Europe's potential destruction in documents he reviews in secure facilities. Anna doesn't ask for access. She asks what it feels like to hold that responsibility. That's the trick. She makes theft feel like confession. The 10th overnight encounter is selected deliberately for execution. The date is November 18th, 1983. People change behavior after repetition. They stop guarding their habits. Security awareness degrades with familiarity. Petrov has been to Anna's apartment 9 times over 5 months. The space has become comfortable. He knows where she keeps wine glasses. He knows the view from the bedroom window. He knows the small imperfections, the loose handle on the bathroom door, the creak in the hallway floor. Familiarity breeds safety, and safety breeds mistakes. That night, Petrov arrives at 19:55 hours, carrying a slim folder inside his coat lining. Anna notices immediately, but shows nothing. He's proving something to himself, that he trusts her, that she's worthy of his confidence, that their relationship transcends the normal boundaries. He thinks he's demonstrating intimacy. He's actually demonstrating compromise. She makes him dinner: schnitzel, roasted potatoes, a green salad. Nothing elaborate. The domesticity matters more than the cuisine. They eat. They drink Austrian wine. She lets him talk about stability, about the necessity of strength, about why Europe needs clear boundaries between systems. He rehearses his self-image, the hard man making hard choices for history. She nods. She engages. She treats his justifications like they're profound rather than rehearsed. At 22:30 hours, he's consumed most of a bottle of wine. His speech isn't slurred, but his guard is lowered. At 23:10 hours, he mentions planning scenarios again. Not specifics, but the psychological weight of knowing timelines that could determine whether cities survive. She asks the question she's been building toward for months. Do you ever wonder if the people making these decisions understand what you're actually planning for? He goes quiet. Then he says something unexpected. They understand the theory. I'm not sure they understand the cost. At 00:18 hours, he falls asleep in the chair for 8 minutes. The wine, the warmth, the comfort of Anna's presence. It all accumulates into a moment of unguarded vulnerability. Then he wakes, restless, uncomfortable from sleeping upright. He decides to shower. This is the moment MI6 has been building toward for 8 months, a predictable privacy gap inside her controlled environment. He leaves the folder on a chair near the bathroom door. He locks nothing. Why would he? He's in love, or thinks he is. She moves like she's done it 100 times because she's drilled the procedure until muscle memory replaced thought. 00:21 hours. The music box opens with its mechanical Schubert melody, loud enough to mask the sound of movement. Minox camera prepared. Film cartridge confirmed. 00:23 hours. First photograph taken. No flash, no hesitation. The camera positioned 15 centimeters above the document surface. The lighting in the room has been deliberately calibrated for months, bright enough for photography without being harsh enough to seem operational. 00:27 hours. She's into the substantive material. Operational maps showing armored thrust corridors through the Fulda Gap and North German Plain. Staging lines marked with Soviet and East German unit designations. Movement timelines showing progression from alert status to border crossing. The maps are stamped consultation draft, restricted distribution. 00:34 hours. She hits the section header that changes everything. 7 days to the Rhine. The title is written in Russian and German. The document outlines a rapid invasion scenario. Warsaw Pact forces achieving Rhine River objectives within 7 days of conflict initiation, using overwhelming armored superiority and chemical weapons to prevent NATO reinforcement. The speed is the weapon. NATO's strength is its depth, its ability to reinforce and absorb attacks. 7 days doesn't allow for that. 00:41 hours. Chemical weapons allocation schedules appear. Specific units assigned release authority. Timing sequences for deployment keyed to invasion progress markers. Target categories: reinforcement corridors, command facilities, port infrastructure. The schedules are presented as operational assumptions, not possibilities. The language is clinical. The implications are apocalyptic. 0049 hours. Her hands tighten once. Not fear, anger. The documents confirm what analysts suspected but couldn't prove. Chemical escalation isn't a last resort. It's a planned operational phase. She corrects her emotional response instantly, forcing her hands steady. Personal feelings compromise operational security. The documents don't care about her anger. They only care about exposure. 0053 hours. Page count reaches 320. She's photographing logistics annexes now. Fuel requirements, ammunition stockpiles, replacement, timelines. The level of detail is extraordinary. This isn't contingency planning. This is execution architecture. The vulnerability isn't the shower. The vulnerability is his ego. Petrov doesn't see himself as compromising security. He sees himself as sharing truth with the only person worthy of understanding it. He's not betraying the Soviet Union. He's demonstrating to Anna why his work matters, why his burden is real, why she should appreciate the weight he carries. In his mind, this is intimacy. In operational terms, it's catastrophic security failure. At 0102 hours, the water shuts off. Anna returns the folder exactly as found, down to the angle of the top page, the slight bend in the corner where Petrov's thumb had pressed too hard. She closes the music box. The Schubert melody plays as the lid descends. She exhales once, only once. Her heart rate has remained stable throughout. When Petrov steps out, towel around his waist, he sees her in bed, reading a book like nothing happened. And that's the real theft, not the pages, the illusion of safety. He joins her in bed. They talk for 20 minutes about nothing important. He falls asleep at 0140 hours. She lies awake until 0315 hours, mentally reviewing every photograph, every page, every detail that needs to be transmitted. At 0630 hours, they wake. She makes coffee. He dresses. He leaves at 0750 hours carrying the same folder he arrived with, completely unaware it's been compromised. 2 operational details seal the execution phase. The film is transferred to a dead drop inside a tram station locker labeled K17 by 0815 hours the same morning. The locker is located in Schwedenplatz station, chosen for its heavy commuter traffic and multiple exit routes. Anna deposits the film canister inside a folded newspaper, locks the compartment, and walks away. By 0900 hours, a different operative retrieves the package. London receives the microfilm packet under the internal routing designation Vienna Package Black. The material arrives at MI6 headquarters within 36 hours via diplomatic pouch. Initial assessment is completed by November 21st. The analysts realize immediately they're looking at strategic-level documentation. The classification is upgraded. Distribution is restricted to intelligence leadership and selected NATO liaison officers. The operational assessment reads, material confirms Warsaw Pact rapid invasion doctrine with chemical escalation. Authenticity verified through corroborating signals intelligence. Source protection, absolute priority. Anna maintains the relationship for 7 more weeks. Not because she needs more documents. The November collection exceeded operational objectives, but because abrupt disappearance creates questions. Petrov must be allowed to process the relationship's end as natural, even romantic, rather than operational. The termination strategy is calibrated carefully. Gradual reduction in availability, references to increasing work obligations, a believable story about reassignment to Geneva. The final meeting occurs on January 6, 1984. They have dinner at a restaurant Petrov chose, somewhere quiet, somewhere they can talk. Anna tells him she's being transferred. UN work is expanding in Switzerland. The opportunity is significant. She's leaving Vienna within 2 weeks. Petrov takes this like a man who knew it couldn't last, but hoped it would. He asks if they'll stay in contact. She says they'll try, knowing they won't. He gives her a small gift, a book of Russian poetry, inscribed with a quote from Akhmatova about memory and loss. She thanks him. She means it. Not because she loves him, but because the gift represents the completeness of the deception. He genuinely believes they shared something real. They part at 2200 hours outside the restaurant. He kisses her. She kisses back. He walks toward his hotel. She walks toward her apartment. Neither looks back. Within 72 hours, Anna Weiss ceases to exist. The apartment is cleared. The bank account is closed. The legal consultancy files are destroyed. The legend collapses into nothing, leaving no documentary trace beyond rental records that lead nowhere. The operative returns to London carrying a passport under her real name, a name that appears in no operational file, a name that Petrov will never know. Immediately, nothing happens, which is the point. There's no breach detected because there's no missing folder, no triggered alarm, no panicked confession from Petrov. He returns to Moscow intact in late January 1984. If he's questioned during routine counterintelligence debriefs, it's about politics and diplomatic contacts, not about paperwork. His colleagues see a general who enjoyed Vienna perhaps too much, who seemed distracted after the new year, who mentioned a woman once or twice before falling silent on the subject. Nothing operationally suspicious. Just a middle-aged officer who had a brief relationship that ended badly. Privately, Western intelligence goes into controlled shock. The documents don't just confirm invasion theories, they replace uncertainty with structure. NATO planners suddenly see routes through the Fulda Gap with unit designations and timing sequences. They see armored thrust patterns designed to split Allied forces before reinforcement becomes effective. They see chemical escalation tied to specific operational milestones rather than desperate last resort scenarios. Defensive posture shifts from broad readiness to precise denial. NATO reconfigures reinforcement timing based on the revealed 7-day window. Anti-armor priorities are repositioned to block the documented thrust corridors. Contingency planning focuses on disrupting the speed that makes the entire strategy viable. If NATO can slow the invasion beyond 7 days, the plan's logic collapses. The Warsaw Pact can't sustain extended conventional warfare against combined Allied industrial capacity. Speed is everything. And NATO now knows the exact speed being planned for. The strategic impact is deterrence through clarity. If NATO knows the plan loses its operational surprise. Soviet planners eventually realize something changed in NATO's defensive exercises. Deployment patterns shift. Response timelines accelerate. The conclusion emerges slowly. Someone talked, or someone stole, or someone compromised the planning assumptions. The result is the same. The plan needs revision. And revision means delay. And delay means the window for rapid victory narrows. But the human cost is different and permanent. The operative returns to London with no medals, no public recognition, no ceremony acknowledging what she extracted. She receives a classified commendation entered into a file that 3 people will ever read. She's offered extended leave. She declines. She's offered reassignment to training duties. She declines. She requests immediate deployment to another operational theater. During the mandatory post-operation psychological evaluation, the reviewing officer notes her emotional baseline. Subject demonstrates complete compartmentalization between operational and personal identity. When asked about emotional impact of sustained intimacy deception, subject stated, "I did my job, he did his. The difference is, I knew what I was doing." No indication of moral uncertainty or relationship bleed-through detected. Recommend continued deployment in similar operations. What the evaluation doesn't capture is what happens 6 months later. The operative is in West Berlin, running a different operation when she sees a photograph in an intelligence briefing. Soviet General Viktor Petrov has been reassigned to administrative duties in Moscow. No disgrace, no public consequence, just a career that stopped advancing. The photograph shows him at a military ceremony looking exactly as he did in Vienna, confident, dutiful, unaware. She studies the image for 11 seconds, then continues the briefing. Later, alone in her apartment, she pours a glass of vodka and drinks it in silence. She doesn't toast anything. She just drinks. The legacy is quiet but lasting. Operation Music Box becomes a template for controlled environment intimacy operations across Western intelligence services. The methodology gets codified: sustained proximity, manufactured emotional dependency, voluntary disclosure rather than coercion. The target is never stolen from, only invited to give. The approach works because it exploits a fundamental human vulnerability: the desire to be understood by someone who seems worth understanding. Intelligence officers study the operation in closed sessions. The case file is assigned reading for advanced tradecraft courses. The lesson emphasized repeatedly: the most effective intelligence operations are the ones where the target never realizes they've been compromised. Petrov returned to Moscow believing he lost a relationship. He never understood he lost a war plan. From one perspective, she prevented catastrophe. The intelligence she extracted informed defensive planning that made Warsaw Pact invasion scenarios less viable. The documents revealed chemical weapons deployment schedules that triggered diplomatic pressure and arms control negotiations. The operation achieved strategic objectives without firing a shot, without casualties, without open conflict. Seduction was a weapon used to stop a war. From another perspective, she destroyed a human being using the most intimate lie possible and called it strategy. Petrov wasn't kidnapped. He wasn't threatened. He wasn't blackmailed. He was convinced he was chosen, that he mattered, that someone finally saw him as more than a uniform and rank. That belief was manufactured with the precision of a surgical instrument. And when it served its purpose, it was discarded just as precisely. He didn't lose classified documents. He lost the ability to trust his own judgment about intimacy. That's a different kind of casualty. The moral paradox is unavoidable. Intelligence operations exist in a space where conventional ethics collapse under strategic necessity. The operative didn't violate Petrov's body. She violated his psychological autonomy. She identified his emotional vulnerabilities and exploited them with professional skill. The fact that this prevented potential war doesn't erase what it cost him. The fact that it cost him doesn't erase what it prevented. What's your take on this? If manipulating someone's capacity for love is what prevents a war, is it still a victory? Or just a different kind of violence? Does the answer change if you're the person being manipulated versus the person doing the manipulating versus the person whose city doesn't burn because the manipulation succeeded? Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you reconsider what intelligence work actually costs the people who do it, hit that like button. And if you think there are operations more morally complex than this one, you're probably right. and we'll be covering them soon.